So welcome everyone to our Introduction to Networks, one of our last class meetings, official class meetings we'll be having. Class officially ends next Wednesday, I believe it is. So the 9th is the end date of the class. If you will, I've sent the email out kind of outlining what's left for class to do. You need to finish up your reading your modules, doing your module exams, doing the packet tracers, completing your labs on NetLabs. And then for the final couple items you have to do, you do have in here the hands-on skills exam, which is to be completed on our NetLab system. Once again, I want to show you, just so you do know, on the NetLab system, the hands-on skills exam is located underneath. We got one of our students doing a lab. Well, it's underneath our class. So you go to our class name, which is ITN 2020, and it's this skills exam right here. So you schedule it like any other exam. Now I know class officially ends next Wednesday, but I do know many of you are going to need time to work past Wednesday. That's not a problem. I mentioned in my email that we can give you up through the end of December, and honestly, I can probably give you a little bit longer than that. But I do want to make you aware of this item right here. On Friday the 18th, we're going to take NetLabs down completely. We're going to do some major revisions on the back end. It will not affect the class once it comes back up. You won't lose any of your reservations. You'll still have your class and everything when it comes back up. I'm hoping it will be back up before December 22nd, but I'm giving us a pretty long maintenance window because we're actually going to pull all of the Cisco pods out and replace some equipment that's actually been in there since, well, more than 15 years. So just be aware that from the 18th to the 22nd, you will not be able to do labs on the netlabs.stanley.edu system. And as soon as we can get that back up, we will. I'll let the class know, and then you can continue working. If you get everything done before then, well, then you don't have to worry about it. But that's just something I want to make you aware of. Additionally, the other two items that are left for you to do are the course feedback, which must be completed before you can take the final exam, and then the final written exam that you need to take. Okay, so those are the items left. Any questions on those items? Go ahead. Anybody? Nope. Okay. I do want to show you something that's important for you as an instructor. Now you've gone in and taken the module exam. So you've gone in here and you went to go take a module exam, and when you click here, you see that you have the take assessment link available to you. By default, exams are not turned on. So there's actually a thing here, and if you go through the orientation class, like I mentioned last time, which I strongly recommend, and I'll show to you again here in a minute, you will learn about the assessment center. Inside of Assessment Center, this is how we turn on the exams, the module exams, the packet tracer assessments, the final exam, course feedback, all of those are under the Assessment Center. You will see right now, if I do manage activations, that I have all of these exams on for you. In fact, they are on through 12/16. Some of them are through 12/16. Most of them are through 12/16. One of them that is not is the final exam, because I can only turn it on for 7 days at a time. So if you find that you're going to need to take the final exam after 12/9, try to give me a day or two warning and email me and say, hey, I need the final exam turned on, and then I will turn that exam on for you. But you as an instructor will have to learn how to turn on exams. It's really fairly simple. You go into the Assessment Center and you go in and you say, but it's being very, very slow today for some reason. Who just showed up probably? Hey, Jonathan.
Oh, how are you?
Assessment Center and you click Create Activations. And then you will see all of the different assessments that are available for the Introduction to Networks class. So if I wanted to turn on, for instance, and I'll go ahead and do this, I'm going to do the secured assessment and turn it on for 7 more days after 12/9. So I'm going to go click on the exam and create a secured activation. Now I know it's on till 12:29 p.m. at 12:29 p.m. on the 9th. So what I can't overlap an assessment. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to go actually just do 1 o'clock. I'll do 1 o'clock. So it's close enough. It'll be off for like 15 minutes, but so from 1 p.m. and I'm gonna do it for 7 days, okay? Because that's the maximum I can do the final exam is 7 days. Our other assessments you can do for up to 90 days. So that makes them a little easier to activate. You can activate them for the entire length of the class. That's totally up to you though. You have the option of how you activate them. If you only want them active for 1 day or even just 3 hours or whatever for your students, that's your classroom's choice. I do it differently in this because of the fact that we are in an instructor training class. So for instance, you've noticed the module exams have been on the entire time the class has been up and running. I use those more for you to learn the materials, not as a true assessment in this class. If you're using them as a true assessment, you're probably going to want to shorten that span that they're available. You can set your exam duration. So this is the amount of time. I give you a lot on the final because it gives you time to not have to rush through it. And then you've got to decide if it's going to be administered in a secure proctored environment or in a less secure environment, which is what I'm doing. Create secured activation. And now if I go to manage activations, you will see the final exam has 2 activations, one running until 12:29 p.m. on the 9th and another running from 12:09 through 12:16. So 7-day spans. These, in fact, what I'll go ahead and do is show you another example. I'm going to do all the other exams, the module exams through the end of December. So let's do this. Go back to Assessment Center, create activations, and I'm going to select all of the module exams. If I only wanted one, obviously I just checked one of them, but I'm going to do all of them. Create advanced activations, and I've already forgotten, but I believe it was 12:16. I'm just going to do through, I could do 90 days, but I'm going to actually do through the December 31st. And I'll do 11:59 p.m. Okay. And on all these, I'm using my basic. I'm not gonna check additional attempts. That way, if you want to do multiple attempts, you can. I do have it set to, I believe it's 3 hours, which is the basic time limit. And I'm going to create advanced activation. Now you will see anybody that needs to take the exams after the 16th. There's multiple exam activations available. So we've got it through the 16th at 1:35 and it comes back on at 3:40. So this is something that has to happen before your students can take exams. The other thing I mentioned at the very beginning of class is you cannot create these activations until there are students enrolled in your class. And I went through the process last week of creating a class and enrolling students. But remember, you go into your class course details to add students. And when you add students, you can add them individually with C tokens or importing from another course. Again, I showed you this last week. But you need to make sure your students are in the course first before you turn on the exams. Once again, all of this you can find by going to Instructor Professional Development under Resources, scrolling down and going to the English Orientation course. And then it will be under your I'm Learning. And you'll see your Academy Orientation course here. And inside of this course, there's an entire section on assessments. So the assessment engine, okay? How to turn on an assessment, how to end a course, how to teach your course. So there's an entire section on how to do assessments and how to use the online assessment. So the tool is described here. If for some reason, when you go into NetAcad and you go to My NetAcad, if for some reason you do not have the Instructor Professional Development, this means you have not been given the instructor role at your college. So let me know that and I will send information to you on how to get the instructor role. The majority of you do not have the instructor role at your school because I can see that by looking at your instructor accreditation. You can see all of the people with the yellow triangle do not have the instructor role. So even if I accredit you like Jara is here, Jara couldn't create a class at his school because he doesn't have the instructor role. Okay. And Caleb, I'll add you to our regular academy and give you the instructor role there. So,
All right.
all right. Any questions on those items? That's a lot to take in, but once you get through the academy orientation, it'll make more sense as to why you have to activate those. And it's the same even if you use the new experience, which is the Moodle based course, which looks very different than the Canvas. but the assessment center is still the same. So the good news is you will not have to do anything different with the assessment center. If you get this, this means you have not enrolled any students in the course. So can't find the student roster, so it's unable to do anything. But the assessment center will look the same once you enroll students in the new experience courses. And that's just the new framework that's being used. Okay. Hey, Ken, welcome.
Hey,
So any questions about what is left for you to do? Complete the course modules, packet tracers, the labs on NetLabs, and complete your course feedback, skills exams, course feedback, and the final exam. Any questions on that? Again, I think you just come in, but I made everybody aware that the system NetLabs will be down from the 18th to the 22nd. I'm hoping it won't be down that long, but that's what we're doing, planning, because we're going to do some pretty major overhauls on it. But as soon as it comes back up, you'll still have access to your class. You will not lose anything. So if you need it after the 22nd, you can keep working. Okay. Any other questions? All right, well, let's knock out module 17. It's the last one we got left here. We're going to talk a little bit about building an actual network. Most of this you understand. This is networking essential stuff, but one of the things I always tell people about networks is networks are like rabbits. You have one host today, you'll have 10 tomorrow. So be aware to plan accordingly. In other words, when you're doing your subnetting schemes like this, make sure you leave enough room for growth. Also think about, and we don't talk a lot about this, but down the road, we'll talk a little bit about aggregation, the ability to aggregate a particular section of your network. We do that on Stanley's network so that each building can be summarized to a block of addresses, which makes it easy on us. So just be aware of that. That's something they talk a little bit about here, but not a lot. Everybody knows about redundancy. The big thing about redundancy is I can provide for you the most secure redundant network in the world, but you won't be able to afford it. So every bit of redundancy that you add costs money. Great example. I just had to put in, or I'm working to put in new power distribution units for a switch that my IT guys need. The PDU, they wanted it to be on 2 separate breakers. Ken, I'm gonna mute you, got a little background noise. They wanted it to be on 2 separate breakers, and they needed it to be to do that. I had to buy 2 PDUs, and I had to get them to install 2 separate breakers. So that cost me an extra $1,000 because I had to do that. But it's redundant now. I have redundant power to make sure absolutely that they won't have to worry about that particular switch going down. Every time you put in these redundant links, it costs money. Okay. So you got redundant servers, redundant links, all of that costs money, but it is something that's important to do. Now, one thing I teach my students is about a concept called dual homed. Okay. And this is typically when you have your network connected to more than one ISP. All right. People get into trouble with this, and they get into trouble with this for one simple reason. Let's imagine that this is my network. So I am going to connect the left router to AT&T and the right router to Verizon, Time Warner, whatever. But I don't do my research in my local area to find out that both the AT&T network and the Verizon network eventually way out here on the back end connect to Sprint, and they're using Sprint as their major backbone. So you're paying for dual homed, you're paying for these 2 internet connections, but above those 2 connections is a single point of failure. So be careful of that, especially when you're going with smaller ISPs locally, because it may be, you know, a mom and pop ISP you connect on the left, mom and pop on the right, and then both of those are connected to AT&T. So if AT&T goes down, your dual home setup that you put all this money into is really not doing you any good. So be careful of that. Beware of who's upstream of your particular service providers. The other item you really want to think about is what's called a service level agreement, or an SLA. How many of you are familiar with SLAs? And I'm gonna unmute you, Ken.
Yes, a little bit.
Okay, what do you know about them?
Don't you get like a committed information rate of bandwidth?
Exactly. So you're paying, when you get an SLA, you're paying for what's called a committed information rate, or CIR. And so you're paying for X amount of bandwidth. The service level agreement says you are guaranteed this amount of bandwidth. Sometimes service level agreements also have downtime clauses. So there's a downtime clause to say how long will it be before someone contacts you, the maximum amount or the minimum, maximum wait, those types of things. As you pay for higher CIRs and downtime clauses that say you're not going to be down for more than X amount of time, you pay more for that. Read your SLAs closely because they're important when you start putting your internet connections out there. Traffic management. We're looking at the ability to do queuing. So the ability to give priority to different types of traffic. Some traffic is more important than other traffic in terms of the need for real-time analysis and delivery. So voice, for instance, needs to have a higher priority than FTP traffic or web traffic or SMTP. This typically, all of our priority queues and our priority do not extend past our network boundaries. So we don't typically take this out to the internet. The backbone network here would be the backbone on our campus network. Now, it is possible to take your individual priorities out across a service provider's network, but you're typically going to have to tunnel through some type of tunnel that will maintain the tagging of your priority traffic. So we're looking at small network applications. Some common applications obviously are web servers, email servers, FTP servers. Actually, I don't know many people use FTP servers anymore. SMB servers using file serving using CIF or Common Internet File System, DNS servers, DHCP servers. All of these we talked about last time. But these are the different types of servers. This has become extremely important, okay? Especially with video applications because of our COVID craziness. I will tell you this, folks, I do like the fact they're showing someone in a wheelchair as someone with a spinal cord injury. One of the things that I am blessed by is that I can do my job even though I have a spinal cord injury. If I was someone who had been in a manual labor job, I wouldn't be working right now. I'd be on disability because there'd be no way for me to do my job. I always tell people when I meet with spinal cord injuries that the world of IT is an excellent place for people with spinal cord injuries, because if you can use your hands and even if you can just talk, you can do a lot of what we do as a job. So voice over IP, very important. IP telephony, real-time apps, all those are there. We've talked about those. But scaling to a larger network, one of the big things that we don't do a great job of is with network documentation. So we need to make sure that we're documenting our networks. We have, Caleb, what's the name of that program that Brandon's starting to use for our stuff?
Netbox.
Netbox. Is that it? Netbox?
I think so.
Yeah, I think Netbox is, yep, it's a documentation. It's actually a free program. It's but it allows us, it doesn't do monitoring, but it lets you actually look at all the different items in your network and set them up and then maintain documentation for them. So up to connections, devices. So we're really trying to do our best to keep a good documentation of our data center, and it's a pain, trust me.
Yeah, it's a pain to install. From what I've seen of it, it's a really good network accessible what do you call it? Excel document.
Yeah, it really is. That's exactly what it is. But they do have it is difficult to install, but once you get it installed and running, it's not that bad.
It's worth it.
Yeah, it's worth it.
Especially
I think the biggest problem is trying to get it started to begin with, because you've got to get everything loaded in so that you can see everything. But once you do it, it's a good little documentation tool if you haven't used it. So Netbox is one. There's all kind of commercial ones out there. SolarWinds makes a really good one, but they really are proud of it. SolarWinds is great network monitoring and management software, so it's different than Netbox. There's you may have heard of Nagios. Have you ever heard of Nagios? This is also a monitoring software, as is, I believe it's Cacti. Cacti is another fairly free monitoring tool. Okay, and this one truly is free. Cacti is a free one. Nagios, you have to pay. You can get a free trial, but you got to pay for it. And then SolarWinds, you definitely pay for, but it's probably one of the best ones out there. Have any of you worked with any others? I mean, Cisco had Cisco Works and still has Cisco Works type documentation, but some of these are more third-party ones out there. We looked at SolarWinds, but it was just so expensive for our data center. It wasn't. We just couldn't justify the cost. But this is an excellent tool, definitely. But when you get into bigger networks, that's what you got to think about. You got to think about doing traffic analysis, doing the monitoring with something like Nagios or SolarWinds, doing documentation with NetBox, or just, you know, you could just get out your old, oh, help me here, folks. It's in not Microsoft now, but it's the tool we always used to draw our network diagrams. God, you're talking about a brain hemorrhage here. I can't think of it. It hit me in a little bit, but there are other tools to do your documentation. If you don't want to do NetBox, you can do it with all types of different network drawing tools. But it's important that you do this. You know, just like one thing we had to do this past week, past couple weeks, I had to justify 2 new servers because I've got servers that are on the end of their lifespan, their EOL. Well, if I got that documentation, I can easily go in there and say to my boss, hey, look, we bought these 5 years ago. So it's important that we go ahead and update our new servers. Utilization, OS, this is looking at OS details, RAM, CPU. Depending on how big your network is, you may actually look at a PC to see its utilization. Some of these tools like SolarWinds, you can load agents onto your all your servers, and when they hit a certain threshold, they'll let you know, and you'll get a warning. So, pretty simple tools there, folks. Verifying connectivity, ping. We've talked a lot about ping and about it may or may not work depending upon whether or not ping is allowed through your network. But if it is allowed, obviously it will tell you that a host is reachable. Matthew and I were talking a little bit about SSH. Typically, you do try to ping a host before you SSH to it just to make sure you have connectivity. But it is important, as Matthew and I both found out, to ping the correct host because even if you ping it and it responds, it won't SSH if it's not the correct host. Here we see the output on a Cisco, on a Windows box, telling you the ping and the reply. One thing you can get here with the TTL or the return time, this will give you some idea of the slowness of a network. So be aware, this is nice to see your delay. On a router, it just gives you bangs and tells you, yep, we're there. It's all good. So that's a successful. A dot is a timeout and a U is unreachable. So this is the router responding with a destination unreachable. If I get this, I'm going to go to the first router in the hop, and I'm going to do a show IP route and see if I have a route to the destination network. So this typically says that router does not have a route to the destination network. We also have the ability to do an extended ping, and I've shown you that several times throughout the class. But if you just type ping and nothing else, you can actually change some of the parameters. This is important because you can change the size of the segments. So the datagram size. So if you're worried about a maximum segment size issue, you can change that here. You can change the repeat count, and you can also source it from different IP addresses. So normally if I ping from, in this instance here, if I ping from R1, the source would be the 209.165.200.225 because by default, it will use the outgoing interface of R1. If I wanted the source to be 192.168.10.1, I would have to use the extended ping command and say that I wanted the source to be 192.168.10.1. This would ensure if I do this ping from 10.1. This would ensure that R2 has a return path or some type of path back to the 192.168.10 network. So that's why I would use extended ping. Trace route, we've already talked about, again, review. So it's a ability to do trace route, and there are extended trace routes. This is something I like to spend some time talking about. Your networks, you need to perform a baseline. Now, back when I was in shape and was racing bicycles and doing triathlons before I got whacked by a truck, one of the things I would do every single morning is take my resting heart rate. I have a very low resting heart rate, even as somebody who's fat and out of shape. It's in the 50s normally. But when I was in really good shape, it would stay in the mid 40s. That baseline, if I got up one morning and my heart rate was say in the 60s or even the 70s, it's actually been as high, in the 70s early in the morning. I knew at that point that I was probably overtrained or I was about to get sick. That was about a guarantee. If I got up, my heart rate was 20 to 30 beats over, I was either going to get sick within the next couple of days or I knew I needed to take a day off and rest. That gave me my baseline. I knew what was normal. I knew what was appropriate. This is a great example. Here's a ping that was done on August 19th, and you're getting return times, you're getting less than 1 millisecond of delay. I do the same round trip, I do the same ping, a month later, and I'm getting 50 millisecond round trip times. This would raise a red flag for me. If we do the pings around the same time on the same day. So the problem here, the only problem I have with this example they're giving you is that I would want it done at the same time, because guess what? Maybe your workforce comes in at 10 o'clock. If so, this may be normal for 10 o'clock. But you need a baseline, and that baseline needs to be pulled over not just one day, one particular time, but it needs to be a baseline that is established over several days, several weeks of the network working at its normal loads. Once you know that, then you will know what is outside of your baseline. Questions about that? What could be one of the problems with doing your testing at just 8 o'clock every morning, 5 days a week?
Everyone turns their PC on at that time.
Exactly. And so you're probably going to have a baseline that shows more utilization than what is typical for your network. It may not, but it may. So you really need to grab different snapshots at different times during the day. It will also depend if your environment is a 9 to 5 type environment, or is it a 7 days a week, 365. Those are very important when you start looking at baselines. For us, one of the things as an educational institution, during the first week of classes, typically you're going to have a huge spike in traffic because everybody's going into classes, everyone's looking at their classes. That would not be a good time to do and use as your only baseline. You would want to look at it throughout the semester during different months and during different times. Very good. So ipconfig or ifconfig, depending upon whether or not it's a Windows box or a Linux box, will let you see your IP addresses on your devices. Again, nothing new here. Ifconfig, we've done all this. On the Mac, you do ifconfig also, because the Mac's basically running a Linux kernel now. We have ARP commands to let us look at the ARP caches on our PC. So ARP-A will tell us our ARPs. And then a new command that is not, all these are common commands we've used before, but one we haven't talked a lot about is a show CDP neighbors command. CDP is a layer 2 protocol. It's a Cisco proprietary layer 2 protocol. So we can use it to see who's directly connected to our devices. So if these were all Cisco devices, and I asked you to show CDP neighbors, R3 will only see S3 because S4 is not directly connected. This can be a dangerous command because it will show, using the show CDP neighbors detail command, it will tell you the iOS version, it will tell you the IP address on the directly connected other Cisco devices. It will give you a ton of information. So in many cases, we actually recommend that you turn off CDP globally. However, having said that, if you're running Cisco IP phones, don't turn off CDP. They use CDP. But it's a good little thing that you can use. This is good too if you got two routers connected and you don't know if the opposite side has the correct IP address on it. You do a show CDP neighbors detail and you'll be able to see the IP address on the opposite side. You'll know whether or not it's been set correctly.
Now, you talking about those IP phones, do you have to leave CDP on the whole system or just the router that's connected to?
It would really be on, it would be on the switch that the PC, that the phone is connected on.
Okay.
So you could leave it on the switch. I think you can turn it off between the router and the switch, but typically since they're layer 3 switches, we need it on at the layer 3 switch at the distribution point.
Okay.
So it gets a little hard to turn it off. So
Yeah.
UPS was just here. This is one of my favorite commands, show IP int brief. You all know that after this year. The only negative is it doesn't show you the subnet mask. I wished it did, but it doesn't. And then show version will show you the version of the router and information about it. So pretty common commands we've been using throughout. Now, folks, this whole section on troubleshooting, here's the most important thing about troubleshooting. Have a plan. Okay. So in other words, troubleshooting, you need to have some kind of plan when you troubleshoot. Now, here's their particular plan here. You know, identify the problem, establish a theory of probable cause. Now, one of the things I will say would identify the problem too is identify the problem and identify the scope of the problem. I have people call and say, the internet's down. And I say, okay, let's elaborate here. Can you get to your email? Yes. Well, the internet's probably not down. Your internet connection's working because you can get to your email. Let's think about this. So you got to identify the problem. Or the internet's down. Was it down for everybody in the whole business? No. Great example of this was the other day at my wife's business. She called and said, I can't get to the internet, or I can't get on the network at all. I said, well, can everybody else get on the network? Yes. All right. So it's a problem with your machine. We go and look and look and look and finally figured out that the VM that was providing DHCP services had, for whatever reason, quit responding. And so my wife's machine had been turned off. It had been turned back on. I had her put a static IP address on it and it started working fine. At that point, I know it's something to do with DHCP. So I had to first identify the scope. It was just my wife's PC that had the problem. It wasn't getting an IP address. I gave it a static. It worked fine. That leads to DHCP. Lo and behold, the DHCP server was, VM was canked. So I just went, restarted, problem fixed. The big thing here is when you establish the identity, identify the problem and the scope, you think of a theory, test the theory, establish a plan of action, verify and implement. Now here's the problem. If you test the theory and determine the cause. If what you thought would fix the problem doesn't fix the problem, make sure you undo what you did. You don't want to add in new problems. So when you get between step 4 and 5 here and you're verifying the solution, if the solution doesn't fix the issue, undo it and go back to step 3 or step 2. Okay. And then try again. If you don't do that, you're going to be introducing new problems. All right. Now, I like to use the OSI model as a basic troubleshooting. You know, let's go first off. Think about it. Layer 1. Well, actually, I typically start with layer 3. I try to ping something. If that doesn't work, then I go back and I say, okay, layer 1. And really layer 1 and 2. I can hit 1 and 2. Do we have blinking lights? Blinky lights, good. In other words, do we have connectivity, basic connectivity? Then if the answer is yes, at layer 3, I'll start doing things like, okay, is DNS working? So I'll try to ping the actual DNS. So if I go, if I go in here, I can use NS lookup. We talked about NS lookup last time, but I can try to ping www.google.com and see if it's resolved. It got resolved. So this would tell me that that's working. Okay. But one of the things that's important, again, just because ping doesn't work, doesn't mean I can't get to a site. Okay. This tells me it's being resolved. So DNS is working, but it's not pinging. But I can obviously go over here and go to Stanley. So this tells me that Stanley is working. They're just blocking pings. Okay. So make sure you think about a great way to teach your students troubleshooting is let them use the OSI model. Pretty much at layer 1, layer 2, if it's not blinking, then you know you got an issue there. If that's working and you can access some resources but not others, you may want to look at access. We're going to learn about a thing here later called access control list. So there could be an access control list that's actually blocking you getting to certain sites or certain areas. The worst possible problems are actual problems at layers, 5, 6, and 7. When you get up into the application layer and it's an intermittent problem and it's something to do, it's a software bug, it's some kind of, a memory leak where after X amount of time it finally crashes. Those problems are a big issue. But you can start with the simple things. Okay. Now, big problem there is, do you want to resolve it or escalate it? Sometimes it's important that if you don't know what you're doing, move it up the chain. Okay. And try to give your next technician that you're working with as much information as you can. There is a command called debug. You be very, very, very careful with this command. If you do debug all in a production environment, you're going to stop the Cisco router. You're probably going to crash your entire network. So be very careful with this command. Only use it when you are told to use it by Cisco support or if you know exactly what you're doing. You can turn on simple debugging and it won't have a huge effect, but you have to be extremely careful with the debug command. And then this terminal monitor is only important if for some reason you've telnetted into a remote machine and can't see the debug output. You may have to do terminal monitor, and that will actually place the debug output onto the terminal instead of placing it on the console where it normally goes. So that's what they're talking about with this terminal monitor. And then they go through with some different items here. I'm gonna let you read through these. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on them because honestly, you can read them. But the big issue with duplex, typically we don't have a massive problem here. But the only place you usually get problems with duplex is with older devices. And then the rest is with IP addresses is typically you've just fat fingered an address or used the wrong mask. Very common. Okay. Any questions? Well, folks, that's module 17. We're really pretty much done. Again, don't forget your labs out here on NetLabs. We have your class. So here it is. Underneath this section, the first one, there are all the labs that are available for you to use. Okay, 292 through 1776. And then we also have, when you get ready to do your final exam, your hands-on skills assessment, it's right here. You just select this and pick a pod. And you can see the pods are there. So, by the way, our maintenance, what I hope to have by the time our maintenance is done on the 22nd is 15 or 16 working pods that will be available. Believe it or not, 800 different students used the NetLab system over the fall. And we were good with less. I think we have 11 working pods. So we're hoping to have, knock on wood, 16 working pods by the end of the day on December 22nd. Are there any questions about the class? Anything? I'll hold a short meeting next week on Tuesday, just if anybody has any questions. But as far as all the other parts of the class, we're done with introduction to networks. I do want you to consider and hope you will consider taking another course with us. Our instructor training schedule is right here. The next round of classes begin on February 3rd. If you do have any folks that are interested in taking the DevNet or CyberOps Associate, again, remember I've got funds available to pay for the instructor training fees for those. And if you are having trouble and just cannot find the money to pay for your next SRWE class, let me know, and we'll talk about maybe using some of my funds to help you take your next class. But your next class in sequence is this CCNA 2 class. Any questions, folks? Somebody else snuck in. Paul snuck in. Hey, Paul.
Which one do you recommend between the CCNA2 or the CyberOps? Either one, like for me, when I'm setting up a program.
I would go ahead and do the CCNA 2 next. I would stay on my sequence right now. I'd stay in the sequence. And especially if you can't dedicate the time to do both at the same time, stay on the sequence so that your program's going to be able to, your students will be able to move on the CCNA. The next class will be easier for all of you because you're accustomed now to the NetLab system. You're accustomed to how our classes work. So it's always a lot easier for the second class, but I would stay in sequence if you were gonna pick just one. Okay.
Hey, Kelly, how many total class? Hey, Kelly?
Yes, go ahead.
Hey,
Can you hear me?
Kelly, how many total classes are there? Yeah. How many total classes are there?
Well, these are the core classes, really. There's one more CCNP Enterprise. There's CCNP CCNP Enterprise, one more class above this one. But these are pretty much the core classes that are in the Cisco program. The ones you see right here. They require instructor training. Now, I will tell you, they're trying to remove instructor training requirement for this class. We're fighting against it because I feel like it's needed. And so do the other instructor training centers. But these are really pretty much the core classes. When you go and look, you go out here and look at the course resources, as far as the ones that require instructor training, those three right there, the 3 CCNA require instructor training. There's the advanced routing and the core networking that require instructor training. And then there's DevNet and CyberOps Associates. So those are really the key ones. So we're really offering pretty much everything that's available other than that second CCNP class, which we'll offer after this first one over the summer. So our ITC offers most of the classes that are available. Okay.
Well, Kelly, this is Jonathan. I'm planning to take the second course. My boss has said, yeah, go ahead and do it. Also, you mentioned an intermediate cert between CCNA 1 and 2. Can you tell me which one that was again?
Yep, that is, and I put it into our course so you have the information and everything in it. In our course, I added in the CCT. It's the Cisco Certified Technician, Routing Switching Technician.
Okay.
And so I added the topics here, and these PowerPoints cover those topics.
I forgot about that. Thank you.
You're welcome. That's added there, and feel free to copy them and store them and keep them, because that is that intermediate one that's kind of used to be. We used to have the CCENT, which you took after taking the first 2 Cisco classes. Now we don't have that anymore, but this CCT you can really pass after this course and going through these PowerPoints.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. And that's something, Caleb, you and I need to go take this thing. We need to study and take this thing. So
All right.
put it on our to-do list. Anybody else have any questions? I'm gonna stop the share here. Folks, I do want you to know I really appreciate you putting up with me as far as all my injuries and problems this semester and everything. I appreciate your hard work. If there's anything I can do to help you, let me know. And I also want you to know that if you do get a chance to do that course evaluation I sent you, that's through Stanley. There's 2 course evaluations. There's the course evaluation you got to do, or course feedback you have to do inside of NetAcad, and then there was that one that was handed that I sent to you in an email. So if you get a chance to do those, do that. But I do hope you'll join us for classes next semester, and I will have one more course or one more class meeting on next Tuesday.
Hey, Kelly, that CCNP, can we take that through? Do we have to take that directly through Cisco, or can we take that through Stanley, or how do we take that?
The CCT?
Yeah, CCT.
You do that through Prometric View. So it'd be through like any other certification exam. So let me So you'd go in here and view, it's really view, but you go to view. Let's do Prometric view. Prometric view.
Is it Pearson View?
Pearson view. No, this is it. Pearson view, but it used to be called Prometric, but Pearson view. And you
Okay.
go to 4 test takers, and you go, like when you want to schedule an exam, you go schedule exam, and they tell you what's the name of the testing organization, and it's Cisco Systems. Cisco System. And then they'll ask you what exam you want to take. So, and you go down here and you have to create an account to schedule the exam and everything. They're doing remote testing, and they're also doing testing in on site. Like we're a test center at Stanley Community College, but you probably have a test center near you. So let's just do Burlington or Winston-Salem. So if you're up near Winston-Salem, Forsyth is a testing center if they're open. Davidson Community College, Davidson County. So there's multiple testing centers there in your area. If you're here,
Yeah,
so what?
I think we offer one too.
Yeah, you probably do. A lot of schools are testing centers. So we are testing centers. So we're open. South Piedmont's one. So there's all kind of testing centers around. But you can then schedule your test for that center. So, but that's the process. You go in and just schedule it directly with Pearson View. Pearson View. And then you can also see view exams. It'll show you all the different exams available. In this case, the CCT. Let's see. Let's clear the filter. Let's do proctored exams. CCT exams right here. That's funny. Supporting Cisco routing and switching network devices. This 100-490 is that intermediate one. But now if you want CCNA, here's the CCNA exam, the 200-301, and then you would schedule it. Probably preferably in English, not Japanese. I don't know though, maybe some of you are fluent in Japanese. But that's how you do it. It's through the Pearson View site.
Okay.
So any other questions? All right, folks. Well, that's all I've got. Thank you so much. I will, any emails you need to send me, send them, and I'll respond as fast as I can. Let me stop my